Today's guest left the corporate world behind to build something that actually meant something to her. She's based in Rapid City, South Dakota, right in the heart of the Black Hills, where she runs Bakes 2 to Tango, a custom baking business she's grown into a real sustainable operation over the last 3 to 4 years. She's learned the hard way that not every customer is the right customer, that tourist season can be both a blessing and a business puzzle, and that building a business you love sometimes means tuning out the noise and trusting yourself. I'm so glad to have Alexia Drifmeyer on the show today. Alexia, welcome to Mixing Up Success.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alexia, you shared a little bit about your business with me, and I am so excited to learn more. But for our listeners, can you start with your origin story? Can you tell us what life was like before Bakes 2 to Tango became your business, and what made you really lean in and take the leap into building this business?
Absolutely. So I am not originally from Rapid City, South Dakota. I'm from Northern Kentucky, the Cincinnati area. I moved out here to the hills back in June of 2023. It was a couple days after I had graduated high school. We made the big shift out here, and I was just kind of looking for my place where I fit in out here. You know, coming from somewhere I had lived my entire life to completely changing it within a couple of hours was a big step to take. And as we were driving out here, I had heard a little bit about how they had just recently revised cottage food laws back in January. So the cottage food laws had only been revised for about 5 months, and there weren't really a lot of cottage bakers at the time. Something that I love to do is I always love to bake with my grandma around Christmas and just spend some time with her. And I loved buttercream and decorating. So I really found my place with it. And when I moved and I had my own kitchen, my own space where I could make it mine, I just knew it was something I wanted to do. So as I started baking, what I did was I kind of started researching some recipes that I wanted to learn and get more advanced with. I did that for a couple of months. I started figuring out like the business side of it, like what I needed for cottage law, what licenses I needed, what I wanted my business to be called, what I wanted to sell. So I had all of these things in mind as I was starting.
Yeah, that's amazing. So can you explain in your state what that looked like, what the cottage food laws allowed you to do?
Yeah, so in South Dakota, the cottage food laws are pretty lenient for us compared to, Kentucky or Ohio. There's not a 40-page guide telling you what you can and can't sell.
Yeah.
It's a single page through the SDSU extension. And if you search SDSU extension, you'll find a single page about cottage food law, and you'll find the actual law of cottage law. And we can sell time and temperature controlled baked goods. We can sell cheesecakes, custards, pies, as long as we are upholding the time and temperature controlled laws. We'd have to label everything. And then if it is time and temperature controlled, then we just need to put on there. So there's really no restriction on what I can sell. I have put some restrictions on myself. Like I don't do full-size cheesecakes because you never know if somebody's going to take that in their car and they're going to leave that there for a few hours. It's not a risk I am willing to take. But
Yeah.
we do have a lot of bakers here who they can bake to their heart's content, and I honestly could not tell you a single thing we can't bake
That's
besides
incredible.
anything that includes meat or cheese.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's really important to highlight because every state is different, and some states are very restricted on what you can sell under a cottage food license. In Oregon, where I'm at, there's a lot that you can do, but you cannot sell anything that needs to be temperature controlled under a cottage food license. Yeah. So that's awesome. So you definitely leaned into the ability to get up and running under the cottage food laws. So tell us what happened next. You got up and running, you picked your name, you picked your products. How did you get customers? You're new to the area.
Yeah, so I created my business page, but there really was not a lot of traction on there. I've never been good at the social media side of things or showing my face on social media. So that was something that I had to get comfortable with. But when I was first starting and I wasn't that comfortable with it, what I did was I would post on Facebook Marketplace my bake days and I'd be, hey, I'm baking this day. This is what I'll have. And I started getting, some older customers in the area because I know the trend right now is the big stuffed cookies. And we have some older people in our area who they want a classic chocolate chip cookie like grandma made, or they want the peanut butter cookies that they grew up eating on their farm. So that's what I made. And I got, my first order for chocolate sugar cookies, my peanut butter cookies, and she ended up living about a block away from me. I can actually walk to her house, and she was my very first customer. She's the sweetest lady ever. And she still orders for me even 3 years later. And I'll walk over to her house with her cookies. She orders the same thing every week. She gets chocolate chip, peanut butter, and ginger snap cookies. But when I was starting, I was posting on Marketplace. I was using my personal profile to kind of like boost my Facebook. I found local groups because you can do like events in your area groups where people just share everything going on. So I would share like, hey, I have a pop-up this day, or I'm going to have baked goods this day. And while I was doing that, I found events. Some were at the Civic Center, some were, at somebody's property. They were just having a big event. So I would go there and I just slowly started building my setup and building the experience that I wanted my customers to have.
Yeah. So, what products did you really lean into at the beginning? Did you lean into cookies or did you lean into other things?
Cookies is what I started with. So I
Okay.
started with cookies, muffins, cinnamon rolls, and that was it for a good year and a half. And then in 2024, I baked the whole year, but I was still working a job on the side. I was still working a full-time job. And when I'm doing my full-time job, I was really struggling with managing my time because I was starting to get more orders, but I was also working, 9 to 5 and then coming home and working 5 to 9. So there was no sleep. There was nothing. And I was struggling. And then in October of 2024, I ended up getting let go from my job due to I was sick, and they just decided that was where we were going to part ways. And I was looking for a job, and we were right in that Christmas season, so I was getting busy with my bakery. We were getting ready to go out of town, and I'm like, wait, why am I looking for a job if I have this bakery that is growing? And
Yeah.
why don't I put some more time into this and at least see how that goes? And from October until March of 2025 I was just baking from my house full time. I was loving it. But then I was like, well, I need to make a decision. Am I going to do this full time, or am I going to go back to work and still bake on the side? Because baking was originally supposed to be a way for me to just maybe make a little bit of extra money so I can go see my family that, they're 1,000 miles away.
Right.
And
Right.
when I made that shift, there was a flea market here in town that had just opened up, and they were looking for vendors. And I was like, well, I could set up there once a week. So in March of 2025, I set up a little booth in this flea market, and that was going to be every single weekend. It was indoors. I could leave my stuff there. I wasn't going to have to, set up and tear down every single day. I
Yeah.
could pay for a month. I could leave my booth and all of like my displays up. I could leave them up. And then I could just bring baked goods as I wanted to. And it was kind of eye-opening for me. And I did that through the whole summer, and I haven't looked back.
That's amazing. I love your story so much because I can relate to it very much myself, having built a bakery while working a full time job and really getting to that turning point where you have to decide which direction you're going to go.
Yeah.
And you have to make the decision on which direction you're going to go. But I was this exact same situation where baking was just a hobby and it was just fun money. It was supposed to be fun money. And I like started like upgrading my wardrobe and all of these things. And it was just like I had this extra like pot of money on the side. And then tell me about your shift, because my shift, when I really made the decision, okay, I'm going to go all in on the bakery, it was hard because This wasn't fun money anymore. This had to pay the bills. How did it feel like for you?
Yeah, so we were still when I was still deciding my shift and what it was gonna look like. That was in 2024, so right after I had been let go. And I was kinda looking at it and I'm like, "Is this going to make enough money to pay my bills? And will I be working enough to where I can still have some time off and I can still, have the flexibility that this bakery was going to allow me to?" It was the first part of it though was making sure my pricing was aligned throughout the board. And what that meant was going through every single item that I sold and recalculating my expenses, my labor, my packaging, because things had gone up since 2023 and I hadn't made any adjustments. So I was like, well, I need to make some adjustments here before I go all in, or else I'm going to be baking 24/7, 7 days a week. I need to make sure that my products, they're priced right, they still align with what I want to bake, and see that I still enjoyed baking them. Because if I was baking, muffins, if I was making 900 muffins every single day, was I going to enjoy making those muffins when I was working to pay my bills? And we started looking at it like, how many cookies do I need to sell to pay this bill? How many cookies do I need to sell for us to go on a vacation?
Right?
And I was struggling with that because when you hear those numbers, you're like, "Oh my god, how am I going to make that happen?"
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming when you really start. You're like, oh, I got to pay for insurance. I got to pay for this. I got to pay for that. And when you look at the bottom dollar, it can be so overwhelming, especially when we're selling cookies. I sell like a cookie for $5. And I'm like, I used to actually sit down and be like, so I have to sell 5,000 cookies to pay for X. And it can be so overwhelming, but that's where we all have to start in business, right?
Mhm,
And I'm so glad you're sharing this because I think so many of us skip doing the hard, unseen work of pricing and
mhm.
really, really understanding what we need to charge to sustain our business.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, and it's hard because no one sees all of this work, right? No one sees that we have to spend all this time and energy doing this phase, but it's critical.
It
And
is.
here you are.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you don't do it, then what I always told myself, "What am I doing in business if I can't take the time to make sure I'm earning money?"
Yes. I love that so much. I think that's so important for our listeners to hear and understand the importance of taking the time.
Mhm.
So you figured out your pricing. You found a venue that allowed you to stay set up and tell us where you are today. I mean, you're just over a year from this point where you found this flea market that you were going to be able to commit to for every week. What does your business look like today?
Yeah, so when I started in the flea market, I was there every single weekend. I had cookies. I had just started cupcakes. Now, this is the biggest thing that people find crazy about my business is I originally did not ever want to touch cupcakes or custom cakes ever. I swore them off because I loved cake decorating and I still love it, but I wasn't confident in my skills enough to sell. And I had just dipped my toes into cupcakes. Not literally, but I had just started, like, I was getting flavors out. I was figuring out what I wanted to sell, what I wanted them to look like. And somebody ate one of my vanilla cupcakes and then they're like, "Oh my God, this is amazing. Can you make my birthday cake?" I was like, "Well, I don't know." And I didn't charge for that first ever cake because I was not confident in it. I didn't think it looked good. I didn't think it was something that anyone else would buy. I mean, I dropped off that cake and I went into my car and I cried because that wasn't something I wanted to do. I kind of felt like a sellout to myself. And that's kind of where my imposter syndrome comes in because I never intended to do this. I never intended to bake cakes or sell them. And now that's primarily what I do. And
That's amazing.
that first cake, It was like jumping off the diving board of people wanted my cakes. They liked it. They liked what they looked like. And at this point, I had only had like a year's worth of training on cakes, all of it self-taught. So I was underpricing myself just to, get a couple cakes through the door. And then once I realized people wanted my cakes, I made a shift. I removed some things off my menu because I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't want to offer muffins and a cake in the same day. So I moved a couple things off my menu. I brought a couple things on, shift focus to custom cakes, cupcakes, and then the big thing came, weddings. How was I going to market myself for weddings when I had never done one?
Yeah.
And my first ever wedding cake was a 3-tier tiramisu cake. My
My goodness.
first time ever layering, stacking. There was no practice. There was no, let's get the ball rolling. Let's offer a free cake just so we can get the idea. Somebody offered it and I was like, okay, take the order now, figure it out later. And it worked. They loved it. And I have been taking wedding cakes ever since. We've got one of our busiest wedding seasons coming up. And I can't believe we went from this time last year not wanting to offer cakes at all to completely offering cakes. And I teach cake decorating workshops for other people.
Alexia, this is an amazing story. You should feel so proud.
I kind of am. I'm, sitting here tearing up thinking about it.
Yes. And, I always say that I think one of the things as business owners that we forget to do is we forget to sit and reflect on how far we've come. You have come so incredibly far in 1 year, and you just leaned in and did it. That's so
Yeah.
amazing.
I did not think we would get to this point. I thought, back in March of last year, I thought I would get halfway through the summer and decide I never want to touch a cake again. And I would just
Yeah.
stick with my cookies. I still do my cookies and I still have customers who they order cookies from me every single weekend. I still have customers who were with me since the very first week and they've started ordering my cakes and then they're like, "I didn't know you did cakes at the time." It's like, I
Yeah.
didn't." And I'll tell them the story and they're like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. Your cakes are beautiful. I would have never thought you didn't feel confident in this." And I'm like, "You'd be surprised."
Yeah. Can I go back to that very first cake that you didn't
Yeah.
charge for? Okay.
Yeah.
What was the customer's reaction? What was the feedback?
She was jumping up and down screaming.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, she was
And
happy.
yeah, I truly believe it takes one person to really believe in us sometimes and alter our path. And she became that person for you.
And you know, I have not spoken to her since. I'm actually getting ready to do her next cake for her son. But, she was a stranger. She was somebody I had never met before. She had just stopped by my booth at the flea market and was like, "I love your vanilla cupcakes. Could I get a cake from you?" And I was like, "Sure." And she was already so happy she was getting a free cake.
Yeah.
She didn't know the reason behind it. She just thought, I was being a very nice person and just giving this away because I liked her. And that was the truth. I liked her enough and I liked how she was confident in me to do her cake, even though she had never seen any of my work.
Yeah, she was your believer. She
Yeah.
believed you could do it.
Yeah.
She believed in you. I love this story because I go back to it really was one person in my life that said, "Why don't you sell your cookies? Why don't you sell your cookies?" And I was like, "People wouldn't pay for these. Like, they're not good enough. I'm not good enough." And she just kept saying it. She said, "You got to sell them. Like, sell them." And it was that one person that I was like, "You know what? Why not? Why not sell these? Why not do this?" And I have had that happen multiple paths in my life. And I really believe it just takes one person. It just takes one person to give you the confidence to do the next thing.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible story, Alexia. I'm so appreciative of you sharing it with
Yeah.
us.
Thank you for letting me share it. That not a lot of people get to hear that story. And
Yeah,
sometimes when I share it, I kind of think they're looking at me like I'm crazy because sometimes the only thing they'll hear of that story is that I gave away a cake for free.
right, right. But there's so much more to it. That's incredible. So, you are primarily doing cakes and you're leaning into weddings this season. You said this is going to be one of your busiest seasons. So just give our listeners, I mean, you showed us what you did in 1 year. So give us what does this season look like for you? Primarily weddings? Do you have weekly orders? What does your business model look like
So
this season?
we've actually had a really big shift just yesterday of what we're planning on doing. So I'm still at the flea market. I actually last August, they offered me a larger space in there. That's a full room where I can close the door and have private events.
Wow.
So I set up in there and I still do that every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And this year, I wanted to kind of branch out a little bit because how the Black Hills are set up is I live in Rapid City, which is the larger metropolitan area in South Dakota, besides Sioux Falls. So there's many smaller surrounding towns. I think there's like 8 smaller towns around us. And I have customers in every single one of those towns and they want my baked goods, but they can't always get to Rapid because it's an hour or 2 drive. And some of that drive is on dirt roads. So I'm making the shift where I'm going to start doing pop-ups in the smaller towns. So, maybe on Monday we're up in Spearfish. Tuesday we're in Deadwood. Wednesday we're in Sturgis. Friday, instead of being at the flea market, we're going to be down in Custer. And we're also going to be doing farmers markets every Friday night now from 4 to 7 p.m. So it's constantly just go, go, go. And we have custom orders, pickup orders, and weddings in between that. So we don't plan on sleeping this summer.
Yeah, this sounds like an incredibly busy schedule. So tell me, do you have a team? How are you baking and staffing all of these events?
Myself and my soon-to-be husband, he has to, request a day off work and come with me.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just me and him, and primarily it's just me.
Yeah. Yeah. You're wearing a lot of hats, but that's part of building a business, right? I think so. This is a phase that we all go through. I've been in that phase. I now have actually a team of people that work for me, and so that's why I can sit here and record this with you while my oven's running next door. But I believe when we're building something that's so close to our heart, we absolutely go through this phase of wearing all of the hats and filling all the roles and really figuring out exactly which ones we're going to lean into and what work for us.
Yeah, that's been the biggest struggle is because you have to fill all of those roles and all of those hats. As I on top of all of these orders, because, people are still messaging me, hey, can I get a cake this day? And the demographic that we have here, not a lot of people like ordering through a website. So it's a lot of calling me, texting me, messaging me on Facebook or Instagram, hey, can I get an order this day? And it's usually, yeah, I can get you in. But I do have a website set up where people can go and they can have an order ready for pickup within 24 hours. Since
Oh, that's amazing.
since I bake full time, there are things on my website, all of my main menu items. If
Yeah.
you order it at 6 o'clock, before 6 o'clock during the weekday, you can get it the next day ready for pickup at 11 a.m. And we have people who do that. And sure, that probably isn't the best for me because, you're like suddenly baking. But a lot of the times customers will, they're not ordering within 24 hours. The website does say like they can pick a date and time, and it's usually a few days out.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Well, it sounds like you are just in a very exciting time in your business where you're growing rapidly. One of the things you mentioned about being in the Black Hills, maybe called it the Black Hills Challenge, is tourist season versus like the loyal locals, the short term versus the long term. Can you kind of tell us your experience? Because so many of us live in like tourist season areas. How do you lean into that? What do you see and how do you manage that in your business?
Yeah, so this actually, I started noticing it last year. What I was noticing is a lot of my long term locals don't place orders during the summer because they're actually out being tourists of another city. So I noticed a drop off of orders where, I'll message people because with all of my locals, I know the days they order. I know what they order. So I'll shoot them a message, hey, still on for your order this day. And then they go, no, actually, I'm out of town for the next couple of weeks. Or they're in Florida, they're on a cruise. So, I obviously can't ship them out their order while they're in the middle of the sea. So I
Yeah.
noticed last June that my orders were dropping off. And I was like, well, what can I do? And people were coming into the flea market. And one of my questions when I'm making small talk with someone was like, oh, are you from Rapid? Are you from Custer? They're like, no, I'm actually from Georgia, or I'm from Alabama. I'm from North Carolina. I'm from California. And I'm like, it's insane to me that, people are coming out and they're from so far away and they're spending money with me. And one of our bigger events here in South Dakota is the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally.
Yeah.
So August of last year, we had a lady come in and I could tell she wasn't from around here. I was starting to kind of, I knew what a tourist looked like. I knew when they weren't from around here. I could tell by her accent that she had never been here before. And she bought some chocolate chip cookies from me and she was eating those and she goes, these are amazing. Can you ship? And I explained to her how cottage food law works. And she's like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to come back next year. But she went home
Yeah, because
and yeah.
well, really quick, that's one of your limitations.
Mhm.
There's always limitations on cottage food, but you are not allowed to ship. Is
Correct.
that correct? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so she went home and I didn't really think anything of it. I never expected like a tourist to, hope for my success. It was kind of just like they got what they needed. The transaction was done. She followed me on all of my social medias. She messaged me telling me about how good the cookie was. She left reviews on everything she could. She was in comments and she still will go in my comments on Facebook and Instagram telling people about how good my stuff was. And all she ate was a chocolate chip cookie. But she sent during the motorcycle rally, she was sending people to me like, hey, you should go get cookies from this lady. And they were driving 40 minutes out of the way just to get cookies. So
Well, that's
after that
awesome.
season, I was like, I need to focus on tourists during the summer because they're coming
Yeah.
in, they're looking for something quick that they can grab. Everything needs to travel well because they're driving around town. They're going to have it in their car for a few hours. They can't have some cupcakes in their car and they're just going to leave it. Because no matter how much I tell somebody, please do not leave this in your car, they're not going to listen to me. Once that leaves the building, the extent of our interaction is done. They're not going to call me saying, hey, I left it in my car. What can you do? So I was switching focus to things that could sit for a little bit. Cinnamon rolls with no cream cheese icing. Lemon bars, people were grabbing those and they'll just sit in their car and eat those. Cookies, brownie packs, bread. So I made that switch last summer from cupcakes back into what I had started my business with. So we had all the brownies and the cookies. And people were coming in, they're like, I want to take some back to my family in Georgia. And they were grabbing, 8 or 9 bags. And they're like, are these going to be okay for a couple of days? We all know cookies, some people leave those on a counter for a week. I've had a customer call me and she goes, how long are your cookies good for? And I'm like, well, if you would refer back to the packaging, you can see the date. And I usually recommend 2 to 3 days since purchase. And she goes, oh, these have been in my cupboard for a month and I ate them. I was like, all right, are you okay? She's like, these were the best cookies I've ever had. They weren't stale. They were perfect. She's like, you couldn't even tell. And I was like, well, I'm glad to hear that. I don't recommend it. But it
Yeah.
kind of just showed me how long people are waiting. So I was really focusing on things that had a longer shelf life because we did have these tourists coming in and they're grabbing it on, if I'm open Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if they arrive into town on Sunday, they're grabbing it and then it's going to stay with them all week and they're not going to give it to their family until next Saturday.
Yeah. That is such an incredible thing to lean into and take note of and really think about your product and shelf stability.
Mhm.
That's such a business brain. That's like, how can I make sure my customers are going to have the best experience, best eating experience, quality, all of the things. So that's incredible to think about and give our listeners something to think about as they explore their own businesses.
Yeah, because my name is still on that product, whether you're eating it here or you're eating it in Georgia. I don't want to send anything out that I know isn't going to be the best quality when it arrives to the customer.
Yeah, 100%. That's I think So many of us are building personal brands that are tied so closely to who we are and what we stand for and what we believe. And that ultimately we have to reflect that in our product because, it's our name, it's everything that we've built going out into the world. So you're exactly right. That's something really important to think about. The final thing, Alexia, I know we're running shorter on time here. I wanted to talk about imposter syndrome and not always feeling like a real business owner. You mentioned that you've felt this. You've mentioned it a couple times in our conversation today, and I think it takes a lot of guts to name it. And I also think that a lot of us can relate to that. I can relate to it. So tell us what that feels like for you and how you've leaned into getting over that imposter syndrome.
Yeah, so how it started is it actually started when I was sending cakes out. Is I would see other bakers online and I'm seeing their work. I'm like, man, I'm not as good as that. Or my work doesn't look like hers. And I was constantly comparing myself to others. And I wasn't thinking about how long other people had been in business, how long they had been practicing, because I was still newer into the cake decorating world. So I was seeing all of this and I'm like, wow, what can I do to make it look like that? And I was trying to replicate cakes of people who have been doing this for 10, 20 years. And I would send a cake out and then I would go home and I'm like, wow, did I do that cake right? Or, I could have done this a little bit better. Or now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I should have done this. And then well, if I had been in the business longer, I would have known. And I've had to kind of stop myself with that mindset because every time I tell myself I could have done something different, yes, it's a learning experience, but I'm also putting a weight on myself with every single one of those comments. Those comments build up. Even if, the person, they love the cake, they leave a great review, they order another cake. And I was telling myself, why am I overthinking it? Yes, there's always going to be something different I could have done. Or now that I've had a couple days to sit on it, yes, I can change that. The customer was happy. They left a review. They went ahead and ordered their next cake from me. So why am I putting all this pressure on myself? And it was just that constant, oh, I didn't get the photos of this. Other people would get the photos right. I'm not a photographer. Maybe I'm not taking the best photos of my products or the best photos of my cakes. So then it doesn't show the vibrant colors that I worked on for days, making sure I mixed it right, making sure I piped it right. When I scraped a cake and redid it because I finished a cake and I just wasn't happy with it. And I've really had to push myself of, no, I'm doing a good job. The customers are happy. I'm happy. They're not coming back to me saying, hey, I didn't like how you've done this. I haven't had a single thing where somebody has come back to me and said, I don't like how you did this cake. Thinking about that and stopping myself from giving myself all those comments that just start weighing you down.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. We live in a world now where I can get on social media and I'm just flooded with other bakers and other things where, even 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. I wasn't always seeing everybody else's work. And we live in a world now where, we're just seeing everybody else, but we forget exactly like you said that we don't know what phase of business they're in. We don't know how long they've been in business. We don't know how many cakes they've decorated. You mentioned you teach cake decorating classes, and I want to touch on that in just a minute, but I teach a lot of cookie decorating classes. I've hosted hundreds of students, thousands of students really, and I share in every single class. I'm going to preface the class with that I have personally decorated over 160,000 cookies. And this is an art form, and it's an art form that comes with practice. And I have just had a little bit more practice than you probably have. So if yours doesn't look exactly like mine, it's probably because you haven't decorated 160,000 cookies to practice. And I share that because I want to make sure that it's mastering a skill, right? And that only comes with hours. hours and hours of doing the work and figuring it out. We instantly compare ourselves with whatever we see online that looks amazing. We also have to recognize that, you are a production baker. Obviously, you're baking a lot of product, you're baking for a wide audience. We also don't know if that was the only order somebody did in a week,
Mhm.
right? We don't know. We don't know. And so it's so great to hear you describe your experience and remind us that we have to stop questioning. We have to stop putting these thoughts. We have to be proud of the work. Did we give it our best effort? Are we, as the customer, happy? Then we should be happy and proud of our.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I appreciate your story because I think so many bakers can resonate with that. We're all struggling, to get better and master our skill. And I don't believe we'll ever fully get there, right? Baking is a skill that you can keep developing and you're going to keep learning new things and trying new techniques. And especially when you get into the creative side of decorating and cakes and cookies and all of that, it's like endless learning opportunities.
Yes.
So the final thing that I do want to talk about is so many bakers, solo bakers, the next kind of step is to start teaching on some level because we get to a point where we can only produce so much product and we can only be at so many events, but we can start teaching our skill to others. So tell us about your cake decorating classes. What do you do?
Yeah, so I do a variety of different types of classes. We've done, vintage cake heart cakes are all the rage still.
Yeah.
They have taken over the world and that's all people want to learn right now. So that was my first ever class I teached is I taught, not teached. But I started with that and then we had people who were coming back and coming back and they're like, "Okay, I'm ready to learn something else." So then I got into the round cakes and people wanted to learn. There's a style that is very popular right now where you only decorate a cake with a palette knife. And it's
Mm.
kind of like you're like doing an oil painting. So we started doing that and I hosted that as a mystery class. People signed up and they had no idea what they were going to be decorating. And it was one of our best classes because when people show up with no knowledge of what they're decorating, their minds are completely open to whatever you have to offer.
Yeah,
But
that's an incredible idea. Yeah.
I've taught over 70 classes so far in the last year and we've had people coming back and I get stories like, "Well, I'm not learning to decorate cakes because I'm going to be selling them. I'm learning to decorate cakes because I have a 1-year-old daughter and I want to be able to decorate her cakes for the next 18 years." Or my mom used to always decorate cakes, so I want to learn how to decorate cakes and decorate them for our family. And I'm happy to be able to share that experience because you can just see people don't want to learn just so they can turn around and sell it. They wanna learn because they wanna do it for family, they wanna do it for others, they wanna make that connection, or they just wanna learn a new art form because like you said, cake decorating and just decorating in general is an art form. You're never gonna be to the point where you fully mastered something. You'll always be growing and getting better at it.
Yeah, I find that with cookie classes, and oftentimes it's just get out and do something with family and have a fun product at the end of it. It's just a fun way to get together and get to know people and engage with people. So that's incredible. That's a lot of classes though, 70 in a year. That's
Yeah.
an amazing amount.
Yes, it is definitely a labor of love teaching those classes.
Yeah. Yeah, the class side, it's a lot of fun. Absolutely. The teaching classes just fills my cup. It is absolutely so enjoyable for me. And I think you and I probably could talk about a lot of things. I I get my socializing is my classes.
Mhm.
I those are my nights to actually, like, socialize with people, and I just absolutely love teaching because it brings people together, and it's just so much fun. But that being said, it is so much work. There's a lot of prep work, and then the cleanup work is a lot, and it's not for everybody, but if it's something that you enjoy and can lean into, it is absolutely worth it.
Yes, it is. Because then you have to think about all the planning that goes into one event, and sometimes some days I'm teaching 2 classes a day, and you have to think about, if you're a one-man crew, you're baking beforehand, you're prepping everything, you're doing the social media, you're doing the marketing, you're getting the tickets listed for sale, you're contacting people, making sure they've got it all figured out, you're answering questions. It's a whole 'nother job teaching
Yeah.
classes.
Yeah, it's another hat you wear. Definitely. All right. Well, my final question for you, Alexia, is what do you know now that you wish you'd known earlier? And where are you taking this business?
Something I wish I knew earlier was not every person is my customer.
Yes.
You get people who reach out to you and they have questions, and then that's it. They don't place an order. They don't, ask you anything further. They don't check you out online. They don't follow you. They just ask you 2 questions and they leave. And I was spending a lot of time when I would get that, if it had been a couple days and I didn't hear from them. And I'm like, hi again, thank you so much for reaching out. I just wanted to see, were you looking to place an order? And then nothing. And I was spending so much time doing that. And I finally realized, they will reach back out if they would like to place an order. They will go online if they want to place an order. Or we would go to events and we would have somebody stand at our booth for 20 minutes. Every single product they had, 5 or 6 questions on it. And I'm more than happy to answer that. And I would tell people, I'm so happy to answer your questions. I do have another customer right here behind you that would like to order. Give me just one moment. I'm going to take care of them and then I'll get back to you. Because you can kind of tell when they're more curious than they want to purchase. They just want to know, like, what flour do you use in this? Are you using all-purpose flour? Are you using bread flour? And I'll let people know. And then they walk away.
Yeah.
And I just learned to kind of, put that boundary up for myself so I'm not I'm not focusing all of my energy on one person who ultimately is not going to order.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely unrealistic for us to think that we are able to serve everybody. And so leaning into to kind of knowing, who your customer is and making sure you're taking care of those people and just you don't know if that person's going to come back. It might take 5 interactions before they ever buy something, so you don't want to like ignore that, obviously. But we definitely have to give ourselves grace that we can't possibly serve everybody. It's just not possible.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. And so tell our listeners, because you have done so much in a year, where do you see this business going? What does it look like?
Well, right now, I think I am just going to kind of focus on perfecting my system, making sure my website's streamlined, getting down the social media side of it, and growing my online community. And then maybe in my 5-year plan is opening up a storefront here in Rapid so I can actually have a place where I'm no longer baking out of my home kitchen, where I can actually grow and expand and I can have my house back. Because I feel like everybody who bakes knows you're going to take over your kitchen, your dining room. If you have a spare room, you're going to take over that. You're taking over your cupboards, your fridge. I've had to empty out my freezer just to fit a couple cakes in there. I've had to clear out my fridge entirely. And I'm like, well, I tell my fiance, I'm like, well, you need to start eating this because I need it out of the fridge because I need to be able to put a cake in there. And we bought another fridge, we bought another freezer, we bought the bakery carts, and they're just everywhere. There's always something on my dining room table, whether it's cookie trays, it's printers so I can print out my labeling, packaging I need to unbox, ingredients that need to go away. It's insane. It's just everywhere. Looking at streamlining those processes so maybe I can have some of my house back. And then hopefully within the next 5 years, opening up a storefront.
Thank you so much for sharing Bakes 2 to Tango with us and being here today to share with our listeners. Do you have anything you want to share for at the very end for our listeners to take away?
Just start doing it. Just do it. If you want to bake, look up your cottage laws and do it. Even if
Yeah.
you don't want to sell and you just want to learn to bake, there are so many resources online for you to learn. Don't hold yourself back because you think you can't.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm going to make a quick plug that I actually just launched a framework called a bakery of your own. And I have 5 different stages of where bakers end up. And the very first one is the dreamer stage. And I have a lot of resources on my website about the dreamer stage and how you can just get up and running. And Alexia, you absolutely outlined what I teach to a T. You figure out your cottage food, you figure out your product, you figure out your pricing, and you go. And from there, you have to dial in your systems and figure out what works and lean into what makes you happy and what aligns with your vision. And so this was an incredible story to listen to and hear how you've built this.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having. It was wonderful to come on here and talk about it. I feel like more people need to be sharing their story just so somebody who wants to learn can hear that and hear that they can do it.
Yeah. And I also think that we all need to pay attention because there's one believer in your life, no matter what you're after, that believes you can do it. And it might be a stranger, it might be somebody you know, but don't ignore it because they know you can do it. And Alexia, you shared that story about your cakes, and we all have that person in our life. Well,
Thank you so much for having me.
yeah, thank you.